My name is Cameron Collins. I'm a revenue operations strategist with Rev Partners. I also serve as the community manager for SprocketPod, which is a HubSpot admin dedicated community. I've got my co-host here, Mark Lerner. He's recently crowned the world-renowned LinkedIn top voice. He's also a director of growth marketing at Deal Hub. And then we have our guest today, Trygve Olsen, director of business.
I really want to know is there some sort of regulatory process to be crowned world renowned? Is there a licensing fee?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
like a domain where you just pay the $15 and you get the
you have to, whoever was world renowned before you, you have to battle them to the death, and then you get to.
Oh, okay. So it's like King of the Hill, right?
Yeah,
There's
it's like very kind of archaic Game of Thrones type thing. Yeah.
Wow.
Or is it like Instagram now where you just pay for your blue check mark and we call it a day?
They got that from my buddy Elon. No, this is the blue LinkedIn top voice thing happened out of the blue. I got an alert on my thing.
That's amazing.
I thought it was one of those community badges, but it's not. It's like me, Richard Branson, and Bill Gates and me.
Wow.
If you get an invite to Necker Island, make sure you take lots of pictures and rub it in everyone's face, because it's not a small achievement. Even the top voices badge, we're going to be talking about how to become an expert in the HubSpot community, and being able to build authority within the domain is a part of that. And even just getting the top voices badge is difficult. It's not hard to do, but it takes work, commitment, and time. So
I worked on it. I once tried to be like one of the top 5, and there was a point where I was I think I was top 3 in the world. But wow, did I have to put a lot of time in to get it. And the gamification on it meant you got a lot of people like me who are intensely competitive, and we're saying, yeah, that sounds great, just so we can get a thumb up.
So obviously being able to establish yourself on LinkedIn plays into being able to establish yourself in the HubSpot ecosystem. Trygve, I want to give you an opportunity, just for those who don't know you, haven't met you, tell the world a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got to being an expert in the community.
I think despite Mark's world-renowned status, I think one of the reasons why people consider me an expert is I fully admit I'm not. And it's HubSpot is because it's one of those things that's constantly iterating and constantly changing. It has this great ability for creativity, and so many different ways of using the same product set in so many different interesting, fascinating ways that you don't even know about, that it's always a hoot to see how somebody's taking the same set of tools and putting it for a different application. But that being said, my day job is I'm the director of BusyWeb for a growth marketing agency based in Minneapolis called BusyWeb. We are a team of about 26 people that specialize in inbound marketing, growth marketing, website design, and all things HubSpot. We have a really great HubSpot team that is extensive and constantly growing. So I think one of the cool things that our ownership has done since we really got into HubSpot is once a quarter, we shut the entire place down, and then it takes the entire day and focuses on recertification, continued certification, continue to get better and better. It's fun. So
that is awesome. I know at Rev Partners, we have a standard that strategists maintain at least 10 certifications at any given time. And so giving your team the ability to focus on just that internal education, in your instance, closing everything down and saying, hey guys, let's have a learning and development day or period of time is so important. And obviously in your own case, you're a CRT, which goes well above and beyond just getting certification. So tell everyone a little bit about the journey to becoming a certified trainer.
I got invited to be a CRT. I think I've been going on 4 years, and it is probably one of the more difficult professional certifications that I've done, in that you had to be really good on a lot of things, and it had to be professionally graded. You had to put, I think, I'll start from when I got the material. It took me 5 months to go through the entire process. So if you get invited to become a CRT, it is no joke. And there are some HubSpot things where you can go, yeah, okay, fine, I'll wing it and take the test. But this is not one of them. You watched every video, you took every little thing, you had to take notes, you had to write a whole curriculum, and then it all had to be graded before they even considered letting you in. So fortunately, I got in 2019, which has been great for a couple of different things. One of which is I actually got to take over one of the HubSpot Academy boot camps a couple of years ago. So I think I'll be entering in my third year of teaching pipeline generation bootcamp for HubSpot Academy.
That's awesome. And we'll be spending a lot of time talking about the Academy boot camps. For those who don't know about the value of the boot camp, I think probably most people watching this have an understanding of certifications. Tell everyone a little bit about the difference between getting your inbound certification versus the discovery call boot camp, for example.
Sure. An inbound certification, if you go through HubSpot Academy, is something where you'd watch a series of videos, which are all very helpful, that go into, I think, not only, what I think is great is it goes into the philosophy, and then it goes into the technical and how to do things, and then it cross applies the two. You do have, it's a series of videos, but you actually do get a pretty good practicum in how to do something. And then you take the tests. Do you guys have a lot of certs?
I've got 14.
I've got 13.
When I got those 14, that was like half of all of the ones you could get.
Yes.
And now there's so many more.
Yes, I think there's 38. I know George Thomas has all 38. There's a woman who works at BusyWeb whose name is Victoria. She says she has 36, and I think she's ticked that she hasn't passed the other two yet. So I'm I'm with you, Cameron. When I started, there weren't a lot, but the tests even in those are difficult because there's one clearly wrong answer, and then there's one answer where you're like, meh, and then there's two answers that kind of basically right. And then you have to choose which one you think is right. You don't find out till way later if you're right. You're like, dang it. And then you come back the next day and you see the same thing and went, okay, I'm going to choose the other one. Shoot, which one did I pick the first time? I don't know. So you have to really get the material. The difference between that and that's self-directed, which is great, and it's something you can do. A lot of times what people do is use HubSpot Academy, I think, through their phone, so they can actually, if they're on the treadmill at the gym, they can be watching a class, listening to a class, and kind of using it as a de facto podcast to get better and better, which I think is a really neat application of that. The alternative is the boot camps are cohort-based learning, which means that you're going to get a whole bunch of people together from all sorts of walks of life. Sometimes people are HubSpot partners, sometimes they're just end users. And the goal is we're going to try and get better about this one particular subject. And we're going to practice it. We're going to do real-time applications. We're going to teach theories. We're going to go through the storytelling of it all. At the end of the day, you're going to get better quicker for what you're trying to learn.
What do you say for someone like me who was never very all that good in school and is much more of a trial and error learner? I've been working with HubSpot, being a HubSpot admin. I've done 2 full implementations for 2 different companies, but I've never actually sat down and done certifications because it's hard for me to, I think, work within that context. But I don't think I gave it much of a shot. Do you think that for someone who is like me and has a challenge with sitting down and learning in a traditional sense, that it's still kind of worth going through the process?
I think that's a great question, because I would say everybody learns differently.
Yeah.
And everybody learns in their own way. And I think there are a number of things you can do with HubSpot. Really depends on what part of the ecosystem you're sitting in. If you're a salesperson, really you can teach sales, but you're not really going to the lessons aren't going to really start permeating until you start making mistakes. And sales it's muscle memory and it's callousing. So once you make a mistake and you understand it was a mistake, you're never going to make it again. But similarly, if you're a HubSpot admin and you're given control of a large program that has, I don't know, 25 sales seats and 100,000 different contacts in it, maybe it's in your best interest to learn which wire to clip before you start clipping wires. Yeah. So I think there's certainly value in that. I think one of the things that I think is so admirable about HubSpot, especially HubSpot Academy, is this is like the old Tom Sawyer and the Picket Fence. You guys remember Tom Sawyer and the Picket Fence?
The Rush song?
No, that's a good one too. But In the Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Tom was tasked by, I think it was Uncle Becky. He had to paint the picket fence. And of course, he didn't want to paint the picket fence because painting is awful. And so what he did was he got a whole bunch of other kids and talked about how cool it was to paint the fence. And then all of a sudden, everybody wanted to do it. So at the end of the day, what HubSpot has done is created a picket fence here and said, isn't this cool to use? And now everybody's, oh my God, yeah, because you can utilize their educational tools in order to get better in the way in which you get better. So I would say, to actually answer your question, Marcus, I think, yeah, if you're really not good in school and you're trial and error, it's not something where you have to come back next year. You can take the exam again in 12 hours, and they'll even say, here's everything you got right, and here's everything you didn't get right. So then you can continue to get better and better. Also, in the cohort learning, that the purpose of that is so you can have, especially in the one I teach in pipeline generation, the goal is to create a safe space so you can screw up. And you can be like, oh man, it's like one of the things that we teach is when you're calling somebody, never ask a question that you don't know that you can have them give a negative answer to. Hey, so if I'm calling you from scratch and you don't know me, I can say, hey, Mark, it's Trigby at BusyWeb. Am I calling you at a good time? The answer is probably no. I don't know who you are. No, and then or hey, Mark, is this now a good time? Of course, the answer is no. I don't know who you are. My time is my absolutely most valuable thing, and if you want some, no. Alternative, what we do is we say, okay, so instead of doing that, affirm them for doing the action that you want, because most selling is a series of micro yeses to get to the big yes. So when you pick up the phone, when you answer the phone, what we teach them is to say, hey, Mark, it's Trigby from BusyWeb. Thanks for picking up the phone.
Yeah, doesn't leave you much room to complain.
Because it's an affirmation of what you already did. And everybody's it's jarring because nobody's automatically saying thank you for something that you just met, right?
I've got a question then that's really interesting because as I'm hearing this, when I think about HubSpot training, the boot camps, the certifications, I think about how admin and like leadership would use it. It sounds like there's a ton of application for, as you mentioned, like the end user, but do you find that employees are getting enrolled in these boot camps, or is that still something that like we're working to make that happen?
Absolutely. I think my boot camp that I'm starting up again at the end of the month, I think there's one company who signed their entire sales staff up because there's so many different ways to do it. In any company, you should have an admin, you should have your selling staff, you should have your marketing staff, and all of those different groups of people are going to approach the tool set very differently, and they're going to use the tool set in a very different way. So that's why the great thing is there's, I think, a half a dozen different boot camps that you can go to that are all very specialized. Now, one of the interesting things that you're talking about, Cameron, is the HubSpot super admin. And I think what I think is that's a relatively new term and it's a relatively new concept, which I think to me is expressive of amazing branding. Because if you think about it as a concept, what it really means is that that somebody who's really having to run a database in some way is a superhero. So that person who often was thought of as a nerd or as a throwaway, now all of a sudden we've elevated them. Their job is that much cooler because they're super. And now all of a sudden the value proposition of what that person has to do is elevated because now they're the super admin. So they're not just an admin. This isn't something that we're just throwing at somebody. This is special. This is important. So now people are thinking, oh man, I really like that. I really want to do that. Because there is an entire subset of the HubSpot community of people who are really shockingly good at using the tool sets. So it's such an amazing celebration that those people are getting glorified and they're finally getting the attention they deserve because they're doing so many amazing things that then turn around and permeate other parts of the business.
And so I think we're really pulling on an interesting thread here then, because a lot of people have asked me, can you build a career in HubSpot? Now, those are people who are not HubSpot admin, but it's interesting what you mentioned where this is becoming the cool thing, because not only is it becoming the cool thing and is it becoming respectable, but it pays well. And
Yes.
I know every company is going to have their own comp ranges, and so I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but this isn't something where if you're a respectable admin, you're making $8 an hour. It is healthy wages for, again, most companies across the board, I
Yep.
presume. And so all of that is to say, one thing that I would love to get your take on is how you've seen people leveraging the boot camps on their resumes.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I think that traditionally things like administrative roles tend to get just bundled and thrown at people, kind of, oh, you do all this stuff, or sometimes it gets pushed onto IT, and it becomes the dumping ground for anything that's computer related. No, we'll just have the IT get it. What I think has been this neat evolution is I think of HubSpot as I think of companies as a restaurant now, where there's front of the house activities and then there's back of the house activities. The front of the house activities are things like sales and marketing, and then the back of the house activities are things like the service and the delivery of companies, all of which become crucially important. And so what's been really amazing is the boot camps were designed, I think, I want to say they've been doing them for a while, and they were run by one of the HubSpot legends, which was a guy named Dan Tyre, who just recently retired from HubSpot. And for a while, there were 2 boot camps. And it's gotten to the point that I've seen multiple resumes with your boot camp graduation on it. It's now part of your Connect.com profile. So when you graduate, you get a special badge that not a lot of people have. And I've even seen job postings where people say you have to have taken X, Y, and Z boot camp in order to be eligible for this job. So it's really becoming, in some ways, almost a prerequisite, because if you've gone through it and you've done the work and you've done well at it, then that says something about you.
I think that's really special because, and to mark your point, I'm not great at traditional schooling, but if I have a drive to learn the material, whether that's the RevOps boot camp, video marketing boot camp, Tregvi, I know that you're involved in a wide variety of topics, right? This isn't just how to be a super admin. And
Right.
so I think that it's really important to mention that these boot camps, they're, I don't want to say not a large commitment, but I think it's typically meeting like once or twice a week. And then there's some homework on the side, right? So it's not every day for 4 hours a day. But for someone that's interested in learning any of the topics that are offered, it's a wonderful learning opportunity that
Yeah.
is it always free, actually? I wanted to say it's always free, but I don't know if that's true.
The HubSpot versions are free. Some of the instructors have follow-up classes that I think they are charging for or creating cohorts. So I think there are opportunities to get a little bit more advanced learning for pay. But yeah, HubSpot right now, everything is free. So if you're going to take the admin bootcamp, the RevOps bootcamp, those are all free. Now, back to your point about how much of a time commitment is this. In my class, what I typically say is 20 minutes a day, every day, focus on just tweaking habits in order in 6 weeks time, when the class is over, you're continuing to do the activity, and you doing something as simple as blocking the time off to focus on the one thing that you're trying to do. Because if it's not on your calendar, you're not going to do it, because time's going to come up, or you're going to watch the new Mean Girls movie trailer that just dropped or something like that, and time just slips away. But if you focus on doing it the little bit every single day, and sometimes it's, hey, read this blog article, or hey, watch this video, or think about this, or something like that. So you're doing different activities, and it's all directed. And then you do have an hour of class time every week where everybody gets together, which is just shockingly amazing. I think in the last pipeline generation bootcamp that I taught, we had people from 11 different time zones around the world. There's
Hard
there's
to
this
get everybody
wonderful,
together.
yeah, there's this wonderful woman named Sarah Medilio, who I think is, on a physical level, I think quite literally half the size of me. And she was getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning to go to my boot camp, which is just amazing and shocking at the same time, because she lives in the Philippines. By the way, hi, Sarah, if you're watching. So you're going to meet all sorts of different people from all sorts of different walks of life. And really the one thing they have in common is we're all on Team Orange in one way or another.
That's interesting. Yeah. So how did you find yourself doing that, teaching boot camps? How did that end up coming to be? I assume they don't ask at just anyone.
There's kind of a feeder program to it. I think I was one of the first people that went through the feeder program, is because as the classes, when I went through boot camp, I think my boot camp was 50 people, 15, I'm sorry, 1-5. I think as I looked this morning, my boot camp that starts at the end of January has 173 people. So much bigger. And so I was asked by Dan, hey, can you become my teaching assistant? Come sit, listen, monitor the chat pane, ask people's questions, help connect the dots. I said, sure. And I did that a couple of times. And then it got to the point where they said, okay, now we want you to teach it. We want you to team teach it. So I teach it with a wonderful guy in Cleveland named Keith Gutierrez, who is personality very different from me, but yet still a subject matter. And then there's a whole sort of feeder system where you can become a producer, where you're doing those things. And then as it grows, or as somebody takes a break, then you step up and do it. It's all part of the trainer program. You have to have a training license to get it, but there's a whole system now in place that to constantly be finding new people. And what's really amazing about the whole thing is I'm not 100% sure on my statistics, but I'm pretty sure that they're taught in at least 4 different languages. So I have the Rose Bowl of boot camps, and that I teach the one that was the first one now in English, but now I know that they're in Spanish. I know that they're in French. I believe they're all in German too. So if you're even a native speaker who is in Spain or in Germany, you can actually take it in your own language. You don't have to force feed yourself in an alternative language, which is another really neat feather in the HubSpot cap.
Yeah. I think that's amazing that it really shows how much of an investment HubSpot has put into the community and the people. Community is something that, Mark, we talk about a lot. We were talking about in our last episode. And when we look at something like the ability to progress a career where you can get a handful of certifications, you can become a teacher, you can then do boot camps. The question I would have for you then is, where does being a boot camp instructor then typically go? Is that usually used more for like personal growth and development in your career, or is there a higher track in the HubSpot hierarchy?
I don't know. I think the neat thing about HubSpot Academy is they're always open to new things. And when the time came for a super admin bootcamp, they figured out how to do it because the community wanted it and there was a need for it. That was always one of the cool things about HubSpot is I think I was told that the dev team has to pick something, at least one thing that somebody else suggested last year to add to a new feature set. And every time they relate. So it's not, they really are listening to the community.
That's amazing.
I'm super excited because one of my ideas actually got implemented last year, which is all about learning. Now, so pro tip, if you are a HubSpot admin, or if you have access to somebody's portal, you can actually go through HubSpot Academy and curate a HubSpot Academy playlist for someone to create a video set and create your own learning that you can then give to somebody and say, hey, here's the list of the things that I think you should do.
Can you do that based on the certification? So I get this one, then this one.
Yep. Or you can even pick out specific videos. So what's so cool about that is there are people, I'm pretty good at HubSpot, I'm not going to lie, but there are people who are demonstrably better at it than I am, who people like Kyle Jepson, people like George Thomas, who just know everything there is to know about it. And those are the people who are teaching the classes. And so you're really focused on industry experts. The cool thing, I think, is that they're pulling from the community itself. They're not just saying, here's our stuff, here, take it. So you're getting a lot more real world application. I don't really know that I answered your question, but I felt like I said some cool stuff. So I'm going to pause here so you can ask me another question.
Yeah. And to your point about learning from industry experts, one of the things that I've really fallen in love with in terms of engaging with the Sprocketeer community is the ability to crowdsource knowledge. And
Yes, for
I
sure.
think the Academy is very emblematic of that, in that it's not HubSpot living in a vacuum. Obviously, there are certain philosophies that they are drawing on for the content, but they're also revising content. How often have we seen them posting items on LinkedIn about, hey guys, or at least the Academy people that I follow, right? Hey guys, I just redid this course. Go check it out. And I think that's
Yeah,
really cool because it's not just static stuff from 5 years ago.
yeah. And I've spent, I would say, like a decent amount of time with Kyle Jepson. And one of the questions I get asked is, what's Kyle really like? He's the same person. He's not faking in videos. He's genuinely excited to tell you about this new thing that he just figured out or somebody just told him. There's all sorts of really cool things that you can learn just by learning from other people. What's the most interesting application of HubSpot that you guys have heard of?
We had an interesting guest the other week who had demoed the utilization of CMS Hub for, it was quite complex, but it for tracking of product and services and like shipping and all these things. It was using custom objects with CMS Hub and Sales Hub into kind of a portal for a given user in a very kind of interesting way. So that was a novel use that we had seen.
I would agree with that. And I'm glad that you took the first step at articulating that
I don't think I did a
response.
great job, but yeah.
Yeah, because right. So this is actually something that I've started working with my clients, my partners on, is actually implementing this because I've either told them about it or they happen to see that episode and they said, hey, can we do something like this? So we've started going down that journey of taking what is on the back end of HubSpot, what we see as the user, but then presenting that back to the customer so they can see what is their ticket status, what
Yeah,
is their response to certain questions on a form. And I think that when we think of things from a revenue operations perspective, oftentimes we think about what I would call the left side of the bow tie model, right? Marketing, sales, the deal is closed. Oftentimes, what we don't talk a lot about is how do we then engage the customer, improve the customer experience while using HubSpot to then create recurring revenue. And I think that was a really great example of how you can use HubSpot's native features to improve the customer experience.
Yeah.
interesting. I think the most interesting use case that I've ever come across is I met a dad who had a football player as a son. And he built, when the kid was a junior, he would put all of training reels into HubSpot on a website, and then he would send emails out to all the schools so that when he knew when schools were looking at the videos, so he knew weighted how to talk to them based on what their level of interest was.
Man after my own heart. I love that. Yeah.
Right. I think I just thought that I still think that was just one of the coolest ways you could use that tool set for a real world application.
So that I think is a great example of how HubSpot is the everyman CRM, if you will, the everywoman CRM, right?
Yeah.
The everyone CRM. Let's keep it neutral here, right? So with that in mind, though, you think about HubSpot as an enterprise level. A lot of people talk about, okay, it works for small business, independent business owners, individuals can figure it out. Enterprise, is it a good fit? Mark, we've talked about this quite extensively. And when TrickView, you've mentioned the boot camps, I'm now thinking about how there are resources that companies literally have as oftentimes free that they can use to upskill their employees on everything from sales to marketing to videography. And one thing that I think that a lot of people watching may want clarity on is where do they go to find all of the boot camps that they can potentially enroll in?
Sure. From the bootcamp perspective, there's a whole series on the website, so it's the HubSpot website. So if you just Google HubSpot Academy boot camps. You should be able to find it and go through and peruse the catalog. I think they're available through your portal through the Academy, but I'm not 100% sure on that. The other thing is you mentioned sort of the enterprise level, and I think HubSpot gets a bad rap on not being enterprisey. One of the things that I have a colleague whose name is Dave, who I think explains this really well, is that there are other tools that are cooler and more granular and more awesome than HubSpot, but it's like flying a plane. How many things can you really pay attention to? Like I'm fairly sophisticated and I have 3 monitors that I'm looking at right now. At what point do I need 6? And is that really a good use of my time? And so to me, I always think that there's a usability factor with HubSpot that you don't always get with other things, that it's what it might lack on the massive enterprise granular level. It also means people are actually going to use it on the basic level, because at the end of the day, you can have the coolest thing in the world, but if people don't want to use it, you're still going to have an adoption problem. So having it be usable, having it be friendly, having it be something that's intuitive still is really important. And the other analogy I'd give is I think a lot of other companies like to compare themselves to HubSpot and explain the 1 or 2 things that they do better than HubSpot, which I think by and large is probably true. But it's like buying an iPhone. Is if you do this one thing better, doesn't that mean that the other thing does a whole lot of other things better? So I always think HubSpot's a smart bet. Sometimes it isn't, and there's obviously some drawbacks of which they're pretty frank about. But I think if you're going to compare apples to apples, I think on the enterprise stuff, I think you have to look at usability, because just because you have this big giant thing, it's got to be piloted by people. And if the people don't know how to use it or quickly, that's going to be a challenge. So a lot of times what big companies do is they'll write a manual. Here's your 4-inch manual on how to run this. Good luck. And people are like, man, what was the tab on that again? So, the downside in doing that with HubSpot is it's constantly getting better. It's not static. It's constantly reiterating. It's constantly getting better. So, boy, if you write a manual, isn't it outdated after a while? I kind of think, yeah. So that's why the training that you can do, the curating the playlists so that HubSpot super admins can make things that are relevant for their team salespeople, because not every sales team is the same. Or the operations people, the service people, how do they use it? Well, okay, great. Let me build you a training thing based on what our company does and the things that are most relevant to us, where it's interactive, it's useful, and then people are learning on the actual portal. Boy, that to me, that makes a lot more sense than here's a manual, good luck.
Yeah. So you've talked about manuals and we've talked about adoption, and I want to connect a couple dots here, because I know we've talked about certifications versus boot camps. And
yeah.
I think that the two really marry together, especially if you either have a fundamental level of knowledge, then the boot camp is going to let you 10x that education. But at the same time, the boot camp can help you to really get the fundamental understanding if you don't have it. So in my mind, the boot camp can be for anybody, whether you have the fundamental understanding or not. Obviously, there's so many hours in the day and you can only do so many boot camps at a time while you're doing so many certifications. So my question for you is, if I was a HubSpot newbie, and I didn't really know where to start, I didn't really have an order of operations, what are the first boot camps or certifications that you would suggest I start diving into?
So that's a great question that I'm going to give you an intensely complicated answer for.
It depends. Right?
That's a good, TLDR, it depends. But I think the genesis of your question, Cameron, I think gets back to what Mark talked about earlier about different learning styles. And if you're learning together as a group, what's neat about that is you can do it in a lot of different ways. There are people who come to my boot camp who are introverts. They don't like talking. They don't like having their camera on. They're just there to listen. Or there are people who are like, yeah, man, I really want to do it. And you say, hey, any volunteers? Like, hey, me, because they want to try it. And there's a nice combination of both. And for those introverts, they can learn from the other person trying. And if that person makes a mistake, sometimes that introvert gets to learn from that. So I think, okay, so back to your question, which was, where do people start in HubSpot Academy? I think It depends on where you're at. If you're coming in as a salesperson, then learning the CRM basics, learning the HubSpot software is a great place to start. If you're an admin, understanding the basics of inbound marketing, I think, is really a good place to start. And then branching off into the tool sets depending upon what you use. I came in when I became a CRT, I was blessed that I only had to learn 2 tools. Now there are 5. So it touches commerce, it touches operations, it's touching service. There's so much that goes into that. So what I recommend is something as simple as browsing the catalog, see what you're interested in, and see where you should go. Also, I also believe in crowdsourcing. I think there's so many different fun resources like Sprocketeer, like Connect.com, where you can throw up a hand and say, I'm new here. Where should I start? And you get HubSpot, I think, is decidedly weird, and that everybody who's gone down the path already will be happy to tell you how to help. And
This is a fundamental, I think, difference in the kind of community that exists within HubSpot and maybe some of the other existing kind of ecosystems, let's say, just based on my experience. I think HubSpot is very much an open platform, an open kind of community, whereas other ones I think are a walled garden and they want you in, but once you're in, you have to earn it.
Yep. It's like the old story of the guy who falls down the hole and his buddy jumps in afterwards, and you say, hey, what are you doing down here? No, we're both down the hole. And the buddy says, well, yeah, but I've been here before and I know the way out. What's neat about that is there are people all around the world using this product. Chances are good you're going to find somebody else who's had the problem you've had, and they figured out a way around it. Is that solution the right one for you? I don't know, maybe, but at least it gives you a place to start. Because if you're looking for an answer, the last thing you want is to have somebody say, yeah, that sounds like a problem, but that's not helpful. You want somebody to say, okay, have you tried this and this? And there's so many different places, and there's so many community-based resources to help you do that. It really is something special. And that's how we teach selling. Is you can be so disingenuous if you come with an agenda, and you can come saying, I want you to buy a bunch of stuff. So let me figure out how I can cleverly get you to say yes. And chances are good, if you're really clever, you can get a lot of people to say yes. But that doesn't mean they're going to continue to use it. And that doesn't mean that they're going to like it and they're going to want to do it. You get back to that point where, Cameron, you're talking about, you're a RevOps guy. RevOps doesn't stop at the sale, at the contract signing. It continues, because it's almost inevitable that anybody who just invests something really large, the next day they're going to wake up and go, what did I just do? And it's going to be so hard, and it's going to be so difficult, which is why I talked earlier about how, if you look at this as a restaurant, everybody is customer facing in some way or another. From the host who sits you, to the server who brings you the menus, to the bartender who brings you your drinks, to the food runner who brings it. If you have a bad experience with any of that, you're really not going to continue to go back to that restaurant. So everybody's got a stake in developing good relationships, and everybody comes at it differently.
So HubSpot, I think, is really amazing given the wide variety of topics that they are in a position to educate their users on. And I love the fact that they give individuals like yourself a platform to really promote topics that they are in turn an SME in. And so I know you teach a wide variety of boot camps. I want you to give everyone a quick overview on the next boot camp that's coming up. Gotcha. And the best way to go ahead and enroll in it if they're interested.
So there are 6 boot camps. The one I teach is Pipeline Generation Boot Camp. The goal of Pipeline Generation Boot Camp is to get people who are new at selling and new sales intelligence on how to look at somebody and how to call them and how to attract and talk to them without being disingenuous and being genuinely helpful. So following that HubSpot model. The next boot camp in the sales track after that is the Discovery Call Boot Camp, which is all about, okay, so you've gotten the next meeting. What are the questions you ask, and how do you continue developing that relationship so people truly feel like you're in it to help and you're in it to work with them? one of the next level of bootcamp that's in the development of it was a video marketing bootcamp, which was developed by a company in Miami called Nextiny, that they talk about how to use video in your overall customer experience, not just in selling, but also in servicing, which is great because especially when you're dealing with something like HubSpot related, I abhor writing 3-paragraph emails, but if I can turn on my camera and do a screen share and then send and show somebody how to do it and talk through and then send that to you, that's just as valuable as an asset as well. There's a great building community bootcamp as well, which Cameron, I expect you probably are going to start teaching relatively soon with all the work you're doing at Sprocketeer. There's a super admin bootcamp, which is truly super, and there's even a RevOps bootcamp. If you're interested in any of them, I'd encourage you to check out the website, which is Google HubSpot Academy Bootcamps. Read a little bit about it, learn about your instructors. Most of the people who are doing it, and I think all of the people who are doing it, are not HubSpot employees. We're all outside people who are giving our time back to the community. So you're going to get a lot of really great real world examples and learn by doing.
And I think it's really important to note the fact that it is run by people who are outside of the HubSpot Incorporated, right? Like none of the trainers, as far as I know, are employed by HubSpot, just as yourself.
Yep.
And to that end, and when it comes to getting real world examples, I've had a few people ask me, like, if I don't work for a company in RevOps or as an admin, and I really want to skill up, where do I start? What do I do? And so I point them to the certifications. I think that going back to the example they used about the father with his son's sport recordings and sending them out, you can use HubSpot for anything. It's a database. And so the thing that I would say is for those who are wanting to learn, like, where do I start? Where do I go? Find the topics that interest you, whether that's boot camps, whether that's certifications, and do those, but also find some kind of problem you want to solve. I, in my early days of career hunting, would use HubSpot with all of the companies I would apply to, because then I could see if they opened the email or not. There are very simple things that HubSpot can do that the free version will help you to skill up.
It's the entrepreneur's paradox, is especially as you're growing a business, you sit down from somebody in front of somebody and they'll say, "Can you do this for me?" And they'll tell you something and you go, "No problem." And then you go out to your card, you Google it, Google, what exactly did I just say I could do? So if that happens to you, that's great. HubSpot Academy can help you learn about that thing that you just said that you knew how to do in the first place, and to get you up to speed a little bit quicker. Not that I ever did that when I was out on my own, because I used to have my own shop, but not that I did that, but I've heard other people say do that. Yeah.
And even extrapolating that into some of the more advanced stages, you had mentioned cohort learning, the HubSpot Academy, the boot camps. That's a really powerful way to do that. We've talked a little bit about the Sprocketeer community, but I am such an advocate for meeting people in the community and messaging them one-on-one. We just launched the live working sessions channel. And so I think that just using the fact that there are so many people that have such a wide variety of experiences that you can reach out to anyone in the HubSpot community and they're probably going to be willing to help you. So whether you work for another agency or you work on your own, I had just made a post about how you're not alone in the ecosystem, because you truly can reach out to pretty much anybody that uses HubSpot and just say, "Hey, I have a question," and they'll help you.
Yeah, more often than not. That's always the fear, I think, is when you're dealing with people who are so much farther down the road than you, are they really willing to turn around and help somebody answer a silly question or my little stupid question? A lot of times the answer is no, but in the HubSpot case, more often than not, the answer is yes.
I've experienced this considerably, especially in the developer community, the HubSpot developer community, which is generally something I would be very nervous to interact with, because I don't really speak their language. But there was a time where I was doing my company's website in CMS Hub right after, as CMS Hub rebranded and came out, and there wasn't as much documentation. And so I kept going to that resource with really technical questions that are like way outside my wheelhouse, and immediately would get answers. And it almost never happened that anyone kind of poo-pooed my question asking. And when it did happen once, everybody else jumped in and was like, don't listen to this guy. That's not how we operate here.
Yep, we don't do that. No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. So I would say if you're just starting out and you're thinking, oh man, I don't know where to do, find people that you can follow and ask them the question. Kyle and George are a great place to start because they have such an amazing following that if you just make a comment like, hey, can anybody help me on this? There's an entire HubSpot Academy bootcamp Slack channel that I think has 4,500 people in at this point that everybody gets access to. Connect.com is a great place. Obviously, Sprocketeer is tremendous. That you're going to find a lot of people who just like displaying their cool work. It's like it's like the world's nerdiest art show because we're all super excited about database management because it's fun. It's the picket fence. Everybody loves painting the picket fence orange.
I think we can agree that everyone who is tuning into this enjoys watching or painting the picket fence, making it orange. And to that point, I met with a handful of Sprocketeers this morning, and we just got to nerd out over solving what is a relatively simple question of,
Yeah.
if I have a contact, how do I know all of the contacts who have 2 or more closed won deals? And relatively simple question that turned out to be a very long conversation on philosophy and debate and what's the best way to do this. And really what it comes down to is we're all passionate about database management, and there isn't always one right answer. There may be a most efficient answer sometimes or a more elegant answer, but I think that it really is a testament to what's been built as a community here in the HubSpot space. And Trigby, thank you for your part in communicating
Oh, super
and
fun.
helping people in the boot camp side of that.
Yeah, again, if you're interested in signing up for the boot camp, I think applications are still open for all the boot camps. And again, this isn't just in English. If you're French, Spanish, German speaker, you can get into a boot camp depending on what you need, depending on how you're approaching your team orange, and your chances are good in specific language. I'm not 100% sure. Once you get into the fourth language, my knowledge base gets a little fuzzy, but definitely check out the website.
As long as you're Team Orange, there's a space for you in this group.
Team Orange all the way. Yep.
We bleed orange.
Exactly. I think as I'm looking at my desk, it's littered with HubSpot tchotchkes that I've gotten from inbound at some point or another. And I think I'm on my 8th or 9th HubSpot moleskin at this point.
Hubvolution Party wound up being a big bang last year for the Sprocketeer community. I look forward to seeing what we do this next year, considering the recent move from Discord into Slack and the fact that we went from a dedicated group of 5 to now 850 active people in the community.
That's amazing. Kudos for growing the community like that.
It's been a wild journey. A lot of pings, a lot of messages. Mark, I know you've been instrumental in helping to get things up and running. Trigby obviously being behind the scenes and just keeping the community alive and running and the education going. It's also important.
Yeah.
So I am appreciative for both of you for contributing to everyone's growth.
I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to give a shout out to the class. There are a lot, just amazing people doing amazing work, and we're just giving the education away for free just because it's fun.
Absolutely. And for those who maybe missed the beginning of the show, don't forget to follow all of us on LinkedIn, Trigby Olson, Cameron Collins, Mark Lerner.
Yeah.
LinkedIn top voice, Mark Lerner.
That's it. World-renowned
Mark Lerner. He paid the $8 and he got the blue check.
That's Twitter, and I did pay it.
Did you really?
He is
immediately.
Did you see any difference from it?
Of course. But it was like it was absolutely worth $8 to just have it.
What was the difference? Just that you saw that you had the check, and
I also I got some Schadenfreude from people like freaking out that you could buy it.
Oh yeah,
earning it. I found that to be funny, but
sure.
And ironic that now I'm on the other side of that. But
yeah, I mostly use X to argue about the Minnesota Timberwolves these days. So
it's for arguing, whatever your unique angle of arguing is.
I root for a basketball team that is perpetually bad, and we're the best team in the Western Conference right now. And yeah, we lost a game, but shut up. We're still the best team in the Western Conference.
I root for a team that's been perpetually bad since 1990. So I know.
Yeah, what's your flavor of
the Knicks?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's been downhill since
that John Starks game when he fouled.
Yeah, since John Starks, exactly.
Yeah, I get it.
Bleeding blue.
Well, I think the takeaway here is that we need to log wins and losses in HubSpot and see how easy or difficult it is to create reports. on everyone's
Exactly.
teams.
I'm gonna automate that.
Exactly. As a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, my pie chart on wins is considerably smaller. But
Well,
not this season. This season, we got a great team.
for those who want to strike up a conversation, they better be following you on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Trig V.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Trig
Trig
V
V with Busy
on
Web.
LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Mark Lerner with Deal Hub, Cameron Collins, Rev Partners, and Sprocketeer. Sprocket on. Bye, everyone.
Great weekend.
Thanks for having me, guys.